Meet Nate and Jess. They're both 29. They live in the same city, work in the same industry, and take home about $2,600 a month after tax. That's roughly $38,000 a year. Nobody is calling that a fortune. Rent takes a bite, groceries take another, and the car insurance company takes one every 6 months purely for the privilege of existing. They both drive a car that starts most of the time. They both have a phone plan they've been meaning to look at since 2021. And they both describe their job to relatives as going really well, which is the universal code for fine. Financially, they are identical. Behaviorally, not even close. 10 years from now, at 39, earning almost exactly the same money, one of them will have just over $100,000 to their name and no debt at all. The other will have nothing saved, about $6,200 owed to a credit card company, and a monthly payment they genuinely cannot remember agreeing to. Same income, same city, same decade, roughly the same raises, and the difference isn't a side hustle, an inheritance, or a coin that went up 400% in a week. The difference is a small handful of decisions, most of them made quietly, once, in the first year. Because here's what most people get wrong about this. Broke is not a salary. Broke is a condition. Broke is what happens when there is no gap between the money coming in and the money going out. It's when a $700 repair stops being an inconvenience and becomes an event. You can earn $38,000 and never be broke. And you can earn $120,000 and be broke on the 28th of every single month, which is a genuinely impressive thing to accomplish. So for the next 10 years, we're going to follow both of them. Every paycheck, every raise, every emergency, every minimum payment, and every dollar that quietly disappears. And at the end, we'll see exactly where the system holds and where it breaks. Let's find out. Let's start with the only number that actually matters here, and it isn't the salary. Both Nate and Jess take home $2,600 a month, so on paper, they have identical resources. But a salary is just the top of the page. What decides whether you go broke is what's already spoken for before the money even lands. Here's Jess's month. Rent, in a 2-bedroom she shares with a roommate, $1,100. Utilities, phone and internet, about $180. Transport, which for her means gas, insurance, and the occasional repair on a 9-year-old car she owns outright, about $260. That's $1,540 committed before she makes a single decision. Then groceries, around $360 and roughly $200 for everything else life invents. Haircuts, a birthday, a prescription, a coworker's baby shower she has no memory of being invited to. Jess spends about $2,100 a month, which leaves her $500. Now here's Nate's month. Rent, in the same building, same layout, also with a roommate, $1,100. Utilities, phone and internet, $180. So far, identical. But Nate's car is newer. 2 years ago, he traded in a car that worked for a car that worked and had a screen. That's a $320 payment plus $160 in insurance, because insuring a newer car costs more. Then, $65 in subscriptions, including a gym he has visited twice. Once to sign up, once to attempt to cancel. Nate's committed costs come to $1,825. Then food, which for him is groceries, plus a reasonable amount of takeout, around $520. And about $250 for everything else. Nate spends about $2,595 a month, which leaves him $5. And that's the whole video in one line. Nate isn't struggling because he earns $2,600. He's struggling because he spends $2,595. Neither of these people is reckless. Nate never woke up one morning and decided to sabotage himself. He said yes 12 times to 12 reasonable things, and the 12 reasonable things added up to a life that costs exactly what he earns. Jess, meanwhile, does something specific with her $500. Not complicated, just deliberate. She works through it in a fixed order. First, she builds a starter buffer of $1,500. Not investments, not a plan, just cash, sitting in a separate account, being extremely boring. Second, once that's done, she contributes 5% to her retirement plan at work because her employer matches 4%, which means for every dollar she puts in, her employer adds about 80 cents. That's not a market return. That's a raise she has to opt into. Third, she keeps building the cash until she has 3 months of expenses. And fourth, the part that actually does the work, she automates all of it for the day after payday. Not the end of the month, not whatever's left. Whatever's left is a myth. Nothing is ever left. Nate has a plan too. His plan is to start saving next month. He has had this plan for 4 years, and it has never once let him down because he has never once tested it. 9 months in, the transmission in Nate's car, the newer one, the one with the screen, decides it has done enough. The repair is $1,400. Jess's car, the older one, picks a similar month to need $1,400 of its own attention because the universe has a sense of humor and a shared calendar. Same bill, same month, 2 completely different events. Jess pays it in cash. She's annoyed for about a day. Her buffer drops from roughly $3,500 to $2,100. And over the next 4 months, it climbs back. That's the whole story. The most expensive thing that happened to Jess that year cost her exactly $1,400. Nate puts it on a credit card at 24.9% interest. And this is where the paths stop being similar, because that $1,400 doesn't stay $1,400. If Nate pays only the minimum, roughly $42 a month, that repair takes over 6 years to clear and costs him more than $1,200 in interest on top. He doesn't do that. He does something better. He throws about $100 at it whenever he can. That clears it in around 17 months and costs him roughly $280 in interest. Which sounds fine, except for one detail. For those 17 months, Nate's margin isn't $5 anymore. It's negative 95. So the next thing that goes wrong doesn't get paid off. It gets added. Now, this is usually where someone says, you can't save money on a low salary. That's just reality. And there's real truth in that, so let's be honest about it. At a genuinely low income in an expensive city, there are months where the math has no solution and no amount of discipline invents one. We'll come back to that because it matters. But look at where Jess's $500 actually came from. It didn't come from earning more. It didn't come from skipping coffee. And it didn't come from a budgeting app with a cheerful notification. It came from 3 decisions: what she pays in rent, what she drives, and what she finances. 3 decisions made once that quietly set the shape of every month afterwards. Nate's $5 came from the same 3 decisions, made slightly differently once. The car was the whole gap, $480 a month versus $260. And the newer car is also the one that broke. So the myth isn't that you can't save on a low salary. The myth is that saving happens in 1,000 small daily acts of willpower. It mostly doesn't. It happens in about 4 big numbers that you decide rarely and then live inside of for years. At the end of year 1, Jess has roughly $3,200 in cash and about $2,700 in her retirement account, including her employer's contribution. Call it $5,900. Nate has $1,250 of credit card debt and a car that now makes a noise he has decided not to investigate. Fast forward to year 3. Both of them get promoted. Both take home about $2,850 now, an extra $250 a month. Watch what happens to that $250, because this is the mechanism that quietly decides most people's finances. Nate's rent goes up at renewal. His roommate moves out and he decides reasonably that he's 32 and would like to live alone. New apartment, $1,350. His insurance renews higher. His phone gets replaced on a plan. Nate's raise arrived and his life expanded to meet it, precisely within about 5 months. His margin is still roughly 0. This is worth saying clearly because it gets moralized far too much. Lifestyle creep isn't a character flaw. It's the default setting. Money expands into whatever space it's given, unless something is standing in the way. Jess puts something in the way. Her rule is boring. Every raise gets split in half before it arrives. Half goes to her life. She also moves into a slightly better place alone. Half goes into the automatic transfer on payday. Her margin goes from $500 to about $625. By the end of year 3, Jess's cash buffer hits 3 months of expenses, around $6,800, and she stops growing it. Everything above that gets redirected into her retirement plan, which is now sitting near $15,000. Total roughly $21,800 by 32, on a salary nobody would envy. Nate is at about negative $2,900. The transmission was cleared, but then there was a dentist, then a Christmas, then a wedding in another state where he was, unavoidably, in the wedding. And there's one more thing quietly happening to Nate that nobody sends him a bill for. He never enrolled in the retirement plan. The paperwork sat in his email for a while and then stopped feeling urgent. His employer offers to match 4% of his salary, roughly $127 a month, and Nate has declined it every single month for 3 years, which makes him one of the very few people in history to successfully negotiate his own salary downward repeatedly by doing nothing. Year 5, their employer restructures. Both of them lose their jobs in the same round, on the same Thursday, with the same email. This is the moment the entire video is actually about. Jess has about $9,500 in cash. That's roughly 4 months of expenses. She files for unemployment, cuts what she can, and starts looking. Here's the part people underestimate. She turns down the first offer she gets. It's a lateral move at slightly less money, and 3 weeks earlier, she would have taken it. But she has 4 months of runway, so she waits 6 more weeks and takes a better one, about $6,000 a year more. Her emergency fund didn't just protect her, it bought her the ability to say no. That's the thing nobody mentions about having cash. It isn't only defense, it's leverage. Broke people take the first offer. It's not a preference. The gap costs her about $6,000 of the buffer. She ends year 5 with roughly $4,000 in cash, around $32,000 in retirement, and a higher salary than she started the year with. Nate has no buffer at all. Week 2, he's on the credit card for groceries. Week 4, the car payment is due and the card is near its limit, so he takes a short-term loan of $500 with fees that work out to an interest rate he does not calculate. Because calculating it would not improve the situation, he takes the first job available 11 days in. It pays slightly less than the old one. He is relieved, and he should be. It stopped the bleeding, but he leaves year 5 with about $4,800 in debt, a lower salary, and payments that will follow him for the next 2 years. Same layoff, same Thursday. One of them lost 7 weeks of income. The other lost 7 weeks of income and 2 years of progress. Year 10. They're both 39. Jess never had a breakthrough year. No windfall, no viral business, no lucky stock. Her salary rose with promotions and inflation, and her spending rose about half as fast. She has roughly $14,000 in cash and about $88,000 in her retirement account. Assuming an average return of around 8% a year, and that employer match running the whole way through. Just over $100,000 with zero consumer debt at 39 on what most people would call a low salary. Nate is at roughly negative $6,000, about $6,200 on credit cards, some negative equity in a car, and around $3,100 in a retirement account he opened once during a burst of motivation in year 7. Over the decade, he paid close to $8,000 in interest, not on a house, not on an education, on repairs, groceries, and a wedding. Roughly 3 months of his gross salary converted directly into nothing, and he passed on about $23,000 of employer match, one paycheck at a time. But the most expensive part of Nate's decade isn't in either of those numbers. Being broke costs money. His credit score means his car insurance premium is higher for the identical car. It means a bigger deposit on the apartment. It means the appliance gets financed at 29% instead of paid for. It means the cheap annual payment isn't available, so he pays monthly, which costs more. He is charged more than Jess for the same products every month, specifically because he has less money. That's not a metaphor, that's a line item. Jess isn't rich. She could not retire. She could not buy a house in cash, and she still checks the price of things. But she is something more useful at 39 than rich. She is hard to knock over. A $2,000 problem is a bad week for her. For Nate, it's a new debt. Now, the honest part, because a spreadsheet will happily lie to you if you let it. First, and most importantly, at some incomes, there is genuinely no margin to find. If your fixed costs are 95% of your take-home pay, and rent in your city is what it is, then no budgeting app fixes that. Cutting subscriptions doesn't fix that. The bottleneck isn't discipline. It's the size of the numbers, and the honest answer is income, benefits, roommates, a cheaper city, or a skill that pays more. Sometimes, all of them. Telling someone in that situation to try harder isn't advice, it's noise. Everything in this video assumes there is a gap to defend, and for some people, the first job is building one. Second, Jess's outcome depended on automation, not willpower. Every month for 10 years, that transfer happened before she was involved. If she'd had to decide each month on a Tuesday when she was tired and something nice was on sale, the number at the end would be dramatically smaller. Willpower doesn't scale. Systems do. Third, Jess has a concentration risk of her own. Almost all of her income comes from one employer. Her buffer protected her in year 5, but her skills protected her more. Cash buys you weeks. Being employable buys you decades. Fourth, some things don't care about your planning at all. A health problem, a family member who needs help, a car totaled by someone else's mistake. A buffer doesn't prevent those. It just changes them from a catastrophe into a bill. And fifth, the mirror image of the whole thing. It's possible to overcorrect. Someone who saves 40% of a low salary for 10 years while ignoring their health, their skills, and their life has optimized one spreadsheet and lost several others. Jess still went on holidays, just cheaper ones booked earlier. So what actually separates them? Not income, not intelligence. A set of rules you could write on one card. Rule 1. Know your real number. Take your fixed costs, rent, utilities, transport, insurance, minimum debt payments, and divide by your monthly take-home pay. Jess, $1,540. Divided by 2,600, about 59%. Nate, $1,825 divided by 2,600, about 70%. Under 60%, and you have room to breathe. Between 60 and 75%, it's tight but workable. Above 75%, you're not overspending, you're overcommitted, and no amount of daily discipline will fix a structural problem. That gets fixed at the level of housing, transport, and debt, not coffee. Rule 2. Buffer before everything except the match. $1,000 first, then 1 month, then 3. Investing while you have no cash means selling investments at the worst possible moment, which is a very expensive way to feel sophisticated. Rule 3. Take the employer match. It is the only guaranteed 100% return anyone will ever offer you, and you have to fill in a form to decline it. Rule 4. Don't finance a depreciating asset you couldn't cover twice. A car payment is the single most common reason a workable salary becomes an unworkable one. Rule 5. Automate on payday, the day after the money lands, not the end of the month. Rule 6. Give every raise a job before it arrives. Half to your life, half to the gap. You still feel the raise. You just don't feel it entirely. Rule 7. Insure the catastrophic, self-insure the annoying. Health, liability, income, insured. A $180 phone screen, that's what the buffer is for. None of that makes you rich. That's not what it's for. It makes you difficult to break, which is a very different goal and a far more reliable one. So how do you never go broke on a low salary? You don't do it by earning more, although earning more helps enormously. You do it by creating a gap between what comes in and what goes out, and then defending that gap from your own future self, who is charming, persuasive, and absolutely will spend it. Nate wasn't lazy. He worked the same hours as Jess, in the same building, for the same money. He just never had anything standing between his paycheck and his life. So every unexpected event became debt, and every raise became a slightly better version of the same month. Jess wasn't disciplined either, really. She was just organized once, early, and then automated it so she'd never have to be disciplined again. 10 years apart, the difference between them wasn't luck, and it wasn't salary. It was a gap of about $500 a month, protected by a system so boring that neither of them ever had to think about it. Subscribe to Zaye for more videos breaking down the logic behind the money decisions we make every day. And let me know in the comments, what's your fixed cost ratio? Under 60%, over 75%, or are you refusing to calculate it on the grounds that you'd rather not know? Which, honestly, is the most relatable answer of the three? See you in the next one.